Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Minister with Responsibility for Information, Robert Nesta Morgan, and we're here this afternoon having taken a quick break from Cabinet to address an important issue as it relates to the Road Traffic Act. With us here today, we have the head of the Island Traffic Authority, Mr. Canute here, Dr. Janine Dawkins, CTD of the Ministry of Transport and Mining, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Transport and Mining, Dr. Alwyn Hales, Minister of Transport and Mining, Mr. Audley Shaw, Prime Minister the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, as well as Minister without Portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister, Floyd Green. We're not going to be long. We're still in Cabinet retreat, so I'll just allow the Prime Minister to kick us off by making the important announcement that he has. Prime Minister Holness.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Thanks for your patience. I know that some members of the media have been here since early morning. The Cabinet, in its retreat, took some time off to deliberate on the matter of a child restraint system being now enforced under the new Road Traffic Act and the public concerns that have been raised. First, I want to say that your government pays attention to what you say as the public, and your views inform our action. And all governments try to be, or should try to be, in sync with the perspectives that are expressed by its citizens, and try to balance them, even when the perspectives often differ. Having said that, I would also want to express the government's not just concern, but sympathy for those persons who have been inconvenienced in any way by the implementation, enforcement of the requirements under the new legislation. We gather that there have been some public transport operators who have said that they are unwilling to carry children. And that gives us a point of entry into the conversation. The objective of the clause, the provision in the law, was specifically to provide for the safety of our children. And as a country, I think all Jamaicans agree that the law should have in it elements that provide for the safety of our children. So I don't think that there is any disagreement there, and anyone who would disagree with that would be totally unreasonable. The question is, does the implementation of this particular provision in the law itself add to the unsafe environment for children? And for the government, and I'm certain for parents and for the reasonable Jamaicans looking on, what we wouldn't want to happen is for our children to be in an unsafe position because they cannot get access to public transportation. And so the government has to consider this very carefully. The police have considered it very carefully, as well as there might be other issues of enforcement that they encounter. And I take note as well that the police commissioner has issued a statement which essentially is saying that the police will exercise a certain level of discretion on this matter and will police as it was under the old act. I gather that was the essence of the statement. But the government cannot and will not go back to the old way of making laws and enforcement. I urge all those who have meaningful commentary, those who are interested and those who have expressed their views, to consider that we are at this juncture because the provision is not new. I will leave it up to Minister Green and Minister Shaw to bring to the public's attention that this matter has been in our laws, the matter of a seatbelt and restraint, since the early 2000s, I gather even as far back as 1999. And this would have come as a result of deliberations coming out of the National Road Safety Council and Jamaica's obligations under certain UN agreements regarding road safety. And it was then piloted themselves from the provision, which we expected no better of them, but it is our role, our duty, to explain to the public that this provision has long been a position that has been supported across administrations and across governments, that there ought to be in our Road Safety Act specific legislation, specific provisions for the safety of children. So it has been in the law since 2001, I gather, maybe even before. Then it made it into the 2014 iteration. Then it made it into the 2015, 2017, and now 2018 iteration of the Road Traffic Act. So it is a provision that has had bipartisan support and advocacy in terms of it being in the law. What is different? What is different, and which is what the public is experiencing now, finally, and people might believe that the government is shaken by this. We are happy that finally the public is at a position where they see their government enforcing its law. Consider, it was in the law from 1999, but nobody cared about it. It was never an issue of concern. Why? Because previous administrations have passed a law that they had no intention of enforcing. It has changed now. People now see that we are serious about public order. Public order is a convenience for all, but it will inconvenience some. And the government has to manage this process to make sure that the ultimate objective of public order is achieved. And that ultimate objective is that every Jamaican can feel safe in maneuvering a public space. So the current situation with the provision for enforcement of a child restraint system in public passenger transportation in itself needs further review. And we have spent the last hour and a half in cabinet going through it, and it is a very deep issue. We have decided, in support of the position adopted by the police, and already explained that they will apply greater discretion in the enforcement of the rule. We have decided that we will make some amendments to the law, and we will do so as quickly as possible. It may come in the form of amendments to the regulations, which can be done very quickly by a ministerial direction, which may not necessarily need to go to Parliament, or if it does, as soon as possible in Parliament. But I think that there has to be even further discussion around safety in public transportation. And that will need a much wider debate and possibly amendment to the law itself, not just the regulation, but to the act itself, which may come in a month or two or so, depending on how fast we can move with consultations and further deliberations on the matter. So specifically, therefore, as it relates to the child restraint system in public transportation, we will make some amendments to the regulations, or as quickly as we can to the law, to give, or both, to reflect the current state of Jamaica's situation as it relates to public passenger transportation. I would now turn over to Minister Shaw, if you would want to say a few words, or if Minister Green would want to give a more direct perspective from the National Road Safety Council. Minister Shaw, if you go forward.
Thank you, Most Honorable Prime Minister, my colleagues. I just want to say the Prime Minister has covered the issue quite efficiently, and just to repeat that in looking at this entire thing, issue, as the PM has already told you, it's been around for quite a while. under both administrations. And so the issue that is of greatest concern is the issue of the public passenger vehicles, and that it would be somewhat difficult for a public passenger vehicle to have a lot of these child restraint systems in the cars, while they have to put in other people and so on. So we have looked at other experiences in other countries, and what we find is that with public passenger vehicles, they make a change in the arrangement. It does not mean that public passenger vehicles must not be careful. In other words, the use of seat belts is still required, right? And the general safety of our children is something that we have to emphasize to the public passenger vehicles, that even when we ease up on the deeper restrictions, that they have a duty to help us to protect our children. So I just want to indicate to you that, as the Prime Minister has said, we are going to amend the regulations and the law to give effect to the public passenger vehicles having a different system to carry our passengers. And this is based on international ways that they are dealing with it in other countries. We are looking at the best models, and we are going to implement the best over the next literally few days and weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister and Minister of Transport, other members of the Ministry of Transport team. As most of you might be aware, the Prime Minister has asked me to provide oversight for the National Road Safety Council. The issue of appropriate restraint in motor vehicle is one of the issues that the National Road Safety Council has championed for over 2 decades. In fact, the data has shown that where people are properly restrained in motor vehicle collisions, then they stand a better chance of surviving those collisions and a better chance at not being injured in those collisions. So since the 1990s, in keeping with the international movement around utilizing restraint more in motor vehicles, the policy of the Ministry of Transport, put on by the advocacy of the Road Safety Council, has been to have appropriate restraint. And as such, this policy was brought into law from as far back as 1999 as a part of the Road Traffic Act. One, to look at seatbelt restraint in general across motor vehicles, and then two, to look at the issue of child restraint systems, which again was a part of the law. It was a matter that when this current version of the bill, which came to Parliament in around 2014, went to the Joint Select Committee, at the time chaired by Minister Omar Davis, it was specifically deliberated on, and it was agreed that the provision would be maintained, and that the definition of child would be put as someone on a person under the age of 12 years old. Again, this has come through multiple decades, but as you would have heard from the Prime Minister, has never truly been enforced. The Prime Minister has directed the National Road Safety Council, upon now the implementation of this new Road Traffic Act, to monitor the enforcement and to provide some oversight in relation to the effectiveness of the enforcement, and also any concerns that citizens may have, whether it be in specific areas or, in general, regarding our new Road Traffic Act. So we will be undertaking that. In fact, our first National Road Safety Council meeting that will consider the new RTA and the implementation thereof will be the 9th of February. And what we will be doing in the interim, as Minister Shaw has indicated, is looking at various models around the world to see how they have treated with regarding public passenger vehicles and the use of appropriate child restraint systems. So clearly, part of what we will do is look at the balance, because the need to ensure that if there are collisions, our children are safe, but also the practicality of enforcement regarding public passenger vehicles. And different jurisdictions have treated with it in different manners, and we will see what is the best fit for the Jamaican population. We will make that recommendation through the Ministry of Transport to the Cabinet. So I want to say to people that we will outline a public way that people who have concerns will be able to reach out directly to the National Road Safety Council to raise their issues, so that we will contemplate them when we meet with the Prime Minister. Thank you.
So as we close this impromptu press briefing, I just want to make a few summary points. One, we take note of the public concern. Two, we are sympathetic to those who may have been affected. True word. We are sympathetic and indeed apologize to those who have been affected. Some amount of... All right, sir. Could I have a chance? Indeed, we will have some forbearance for those who have been affected or may have received a ticket as a result of this. We have... Nature. Good. You're not hearing it. And I thought that the country was hearing this wonderful bird above me. It's a parrot. You sure? One of our protected species. Right. No. So as I was saying, we have taken note of the great concern expressed by the public regarding the child restraint clause in the new RTA, and we also take note that there are some persons who may have been inconvenienced. I gather that there was a movement afoot by some members in public transportation not to carry children, and that creates a situation of great unsafety. And for this reason, the ultimate objective of the Road Safety Act, and in this clause in particular, is to ensure that our children are safe. So if it is that this clause could potentially create a situation that is not safe for our children, then it gives the government, it behooves the government to take a second look at the clause, which is what we have decided to do. The police have already given notice to the public that they will exercise a higher level of discretion on this matter. And so it means that there will be some forbearance applied there as well. And we will move as quickly as possible to make amendments, and that might be in stages. It may be that we amend the regulations, which can be done ministerially, and then we move to amend the actual act itself, which may take a little time, but we will try and do it as quickly as possible. Now would be a good time for members of the public who have made their comments on social media or using other means to, actually write to the Road Safety Council and make your suggestions. Minister Green has been put in charge of that process. We want to hear from you, and we consider this to be a part of developing a culture of safety. It must be understood that the government is not resigning from the position that there must be prescribed safety measures in our law. What that will be ultimately will come down to what we can carry the nation with. What are our idiosyncrasies, our cultural practices, what our infrastructure can allow. And therefore, we will have further discussions in that regard and quickly ensure that our act reflects the aspirations that I believe all Jamaicans share, which is that our transportation is safe, and safe in particular for our children. So I want again thank you, members of the media who have been very patient, and thank the members of the public who have been very understanding and whose comments and criticisms and suggestions have been very useful. just as an aside, just observing all the commentary and the actions, Jamaica's democracy is alive and well, and you have a very responsive government. Thank you.